You walk into a store and see a t-shirt hanging on a rack. It has a price tag, $29.99. You look at it and think, that's a nice shirt, but it's a bit expensive. Or, that's a good deal for a shirt like that. The shirt seems to have value, not just because you like how it looks, but because it costs $29.99. The price appears to come from the shirt itself, as if the fabric and thread somehow naturally contain those dollars. But here's what you don't see. The Bangladeshi woman who worked 14 hours in a factory with no air conditioning to sew that shirt for 30 cents. You don't see the cotton farmer in India who borrowed money to buy seeds from a multinational corporation and is now trapped in debt. You don't see the truck driver who transported the fabric, the ship worker who loaded containers, the retail worker who hung the shirt on the rack. You see a thing with a price. But what you're actually looking at is the condensed form of human relationships, exploitation, power, labor, struggle, that have been mystified and hidden behind the appearance of a simple market transaction. Karl Marx called this commodity fetishism, the way that capitalist society makes social relationships between people appear as relationships between things. The shirt doesn't naturally cost $29.99. That price represents the crystallized form of all the human labor, all the social relationships, all the power dynamics that went into making it available for purchase. But Marx understood something even more disturbing. This isn't just about misleading prices or hidden supply chains. Commodity fetishism is the foundation of how capitalism conceals its own operations, making exploitation appear as natural market forces, making human choices appear as inevitable economic laws. Once you understand commodity fetishism, you'll never look at a store, a price tag, or an advertisement the same way again, because you'll see through the illusion to the human reality underneath. Marx identified commodity fetishism as capitalism's greatest magic trick, making social relationships disappear and reappear as relationships between objects. When you buy that $29.99 shirt, you're not just acquiring fabric. You're participating in a complex web of social relationships that spans the globe. But those relationships are invisible to you. The magic works by making everything appear to happen naturally through market forces. The price of the shirt seems to emerge from supply and demand, competition between brands, the natural value of cotton and labor. What disappears from view is that every aspect of this process involves human decisions made within specific power relationships. Someone decided to pay garment workers 30 cents per hour instead of $3. Someone decided to use pesticides that poison water supplies instead of organic farming methods. Someone decided to ship production to countries with weak labor laws instead of maintaining local manufacturing. These aren't natural market outcomes. They're choices made by people with power to maximize their profit at the expense of people without power. But commodity fetishism makes these choices invisible by presenting their outcomes as natural facts. The shirt costs $29.99 not because of exploitation, but because of competitive pricing. Workers earn 30 cents per hour not because of power imbalances, but because of global wage competition. Environmental destruction happens not because of corporate decisions, but because of economic efficiency. Marx understood that this mystification isn't accidental. It's necessary for the system to function. If you could see the true human cost of every purchase, if the social relationships were transparent instead of hidden, the system would face constant legitimacy crises. People would ask why some humans work in air-conditioned offices while others collapse from heat in factories. They would question why some people accumulate billions while others can't afford basic health care. Commodity fetishism prevents these questions by making exploitation appear as natural market outcomes rather than human choices that could be made differently. When Marx talked about commodity fetishism, he was revealing something profound about how capitalism transforms human relationships into thing relationships. In pre-capitalist societies, if you needed a shirt, you might trade directly with a weaver, or your community might have shared resources and skills. The social relationships were visible and direct. But in capitalist society, human relationships become mediated through commodities. You don't relate directly to the person who made your shirt. Instead, you relate to the shirt as a thing that has a price, and that price mediates your relationship to all the invisible human labor that created it. This creates what Marx called the social life of things. Commodities appear to have relationships with each other independent of the humans who made them. Coffee competes with tea. Cars replace horses. iPhones disrupt entire industries. The things seem to act on their own, making decisions, creating changes, driving history forward. Meanwhile, the humans who actually create and move and sell these things disappear from the story. The Guatemalan coffee farmer who can't afford to buy the coffee she grows becomes invisible. The Chinese factory worker who assembles iPhones while living in a dormitory with suicide nets becomes a footnote. The Amazon warehouse worker who processes hundreds of packages per hour while being monitored by algorithms becomes a statistic. This inversion, where things become subjects and humans become objects, is at the heart of commodity fetishism. You relate more directly to your smartphone than to the person who assembled it. You know more about the personality of brands than about the personalities of the people who create those brands' products. Marx saw this as a form of alienation so profound that it changes how people understand themselves and their relationships with others. When human relationships are constantly mediated through things, people start to see themselves as things too. Workers become human resources, students become human capital, patients become healthcare consumers. The ultimate form of commodity fetishism, according to Marx, is money itself. Money appears to have magical properties, the ability to transform into any other commodity, to grow through investment, to solve problems and create opportunities. But money is just a social convention, a representation of social relationships that has no power except what human societies give it. Think about how we talk about money. Money makes money. Money talks. Money doesn't sleep. We attribute agency and personality to money as if it were alive. Meanwhile, the humans whose labor creates the value that money represents become secondary to money's supposed autonomous power. This creates bizarre inversions where money seems more real than the human activity it represents. A company can be worth billions while paying workers so little they need food stamps. A person can be wealthy by owning stocks while producing nothing of social value. A financial transaction can generate profit while contributing nothing to human welfare. Marx understood that money fetishism enables some of capitalism's most destructive dynamics. When money appears to naturally generate more money through investment, it obscures the fact that all returns on investment ultimately come from human labor. The billionaire's passive income isn't generated by the magical properties of capital. It's extracted from the active labor of workers who receive less value than they create. When money seems to have its own logic independent of human needs, it becomes possible to make decisions that serve money's interests at the expense of human interests. Companies lay off workers to boost stock prices. Governments impose austerity to satisfy bond markets. Communities get destroyed to create profitable investment opportunities. The fetishism of money makes these outcomes appear rational and inevitable, rather than choices that prioritize abstract financial returns over concrete human welfare. Modern capitalism has evolved commodity fetishism into what we might call consumer choice fetishism. The belief that market choices reflect personal preferences rather than structural constraints and corporate manipulation. When you choose between Coke and Pepsi, Apple and Samsung, Nike and Adidas, this appears to be an expression of your individual personality and autonomous decision-making. But Marx would point out that these choices are happening within a framework designed to obscure more fundamental choices that aren't available to you. You can choose between different brands of smartphones, but you can't choose to have a smartphone that wasn't assembled under exploitative labor conditions. You can choose between different kinds of cars, but you can't choose to live in a community designed around public transportation instead of car ownership. The proliferation of consumer choices masks the narrowing of social choices. You have hundreds of breakfast cereals to choose from, but you can't choose to live in a society where everyone has guaranteed access to healthy food. You can select from thousands of entertainment options, but you can't choose to work fewer hours so you have more time to enjoy them. Consumer choice fetishism makes this trade-off invisible by presenting consumption as the primary realm of human freedom and self-expression. Who you are becomes defined by what you buy rather than what you do, create, or contribute to your community. Your identity gets reduced to your consumer preferences, and your agency gets limited to your purchasing power. This serves ideology by channeling political energy into market activity. Instead of organizing to change the conditions that make ethical consumption impossible, people try to vote with their dollars for slightly less unethical products. Instead of demanding fundamental changes in how the economy operates, they seek individual solutions through better consumer choices. But Marx understood that as long as production is organized around profit rather than human need, consumer choices will always be constrained by what's profitable to produce, not what would actually serve human welfare. Contemporary capitalism has developed commodity fetishism into what Marx couldn't have fully anticipated. The complete transformation of commodities into pure image and association. Brands no longer just identify products. They sell lifestyles, identities, dreams, and social relationships. When you buy Nike shoes, you're not just buying footwear. You're buying association with athletic achievement, rebellion against limits, membership in a community of people who just do it. The actual shoes, the materials, the labor, the manufacturing process, become secondary to the brand experience. This represents the completion of commodity fetishism, not just hiding the social relationships behind products, but replacing them entirely with manufactured social relationships. Instead of connecting with the person who made your shoes, you connect with the imaginary community of Nike consumers. Instead of understanding the real conditions of production, you participate in the fantasy of athletic transcendence. Brand fetishism creates what Marx might have called pseudo-social relationships, connections that feel meaningful but are actually mediated through corporate marketing rather than genuine human interaction. You feel closer to people who share your brand preferences than to people who share your actual life conditions. This pseudo-sociality serves to fragment potential political solidarity. Instead of workers recognizing their common interests across different industries and brands, they identify with the consumer tribes created by corporate marketing. Instead of communities organizing around shared needs and values, they organize around shared consumption patterns. The ultimate expression of brand fetishism is when people defend corporations as if they were defending friends or family members. When Apple users feel personally attacked by criticism of Apple products, when Tesla owners take criticism of Tesla as criticism of their own identity, the fetishization is complete. The corporate brand has successfully replaced human relationships as a source of identity and belonging. Modern commodity fetishism has a particularly sophisticated form in how we relate to technology. Smartphones, social media platforms, artificial intelligence, automation. These technologies appear to have their own agency and developmental logic independent of the human decisions and social relationships that create and deploy them. We say technology is changing society, as if technology were an autonomous force rather than a set of tools created by specific people for specific purposes within specific power relationships. We talk about technological unemployment as if robots decided on their own to replace workers, rather than acknowledging that owners chose to use technology to eliminate labor costs, rather than reduce working hours for everyone. This technological fetishism obscures the fact that every technology embeds specific social relationships and serves particular interests. Social media platforms aren't neutral tools for connection. They're designed to harvest attention and data for corporate profit. Automation isn't a natural progression toward efficiency. It's a strategy for reducing labor costs and worker power. Artificial intelligence isn't an inevitable development toward machine consciousness. It's a project for creating systems that can perform cognitive labor without paying human wages. Marx understood that the appearance of technological autonomy serves ideological functions by making social choices appear as technical necessities. If automation is just the natural development of technology, then mass unemployment becomes an unfortunate but inevitable side effect rather than a choice to prioritize capital efficiency over human welfare. If social media addiction is just the natural result of technological advancement, then we don't need to question the business models that make addiction profitable. But Marx would insist that technology is always social technology. It embeds and enforces specific relationships between people. The question isn't whether technology is good or bad, but who controls it, how it's designed, and whose interests it serves. Understanding commodity fetishism doesn't mean you should feel guilty about every purchase or try to escape the market economy entirely. Marx wasn't advocating for individual consumer activism or lifestyle changes. He was analyzing how capitalism systematically mystifies social relationships to prevent people from understanding and challenging the system. The point of recognizing commodity fetishism is to see through the mystification to the human reality underneath. When you buy that $29.99 shirt, you can choose to see it not just as a thing with a price, but as the crystallized form of human labor, social relationships, and power dynamics that extend across the globe. This doesn't mean you shouldn't buy the shirt if you need it. It means you can understand that the real problem isn't individual consumption choices, but the social relationships that make ethical consumption impossible under current conditions. The Bangladeshi garment worker and the American consumer have more in common with each other than either has with the shareholders who profit from keeping wages low and prices high. Breaking the fetish means recognizing that the seemingly natural laws of market society are actually human choices that could be made differently. Prices don't emerge from natural market forces. They reflect specific power relationships and policy decisions. Economic inequality isn't the inevitable result of different talents and efforts. It's the predictable outcome of systems designed to concentrate wealth. Most importantly, breaking commodity fetishism means understanding that the things you see in stores, the prices on tags, the brands on products, are all representations of social relationships between real human beings. and those relationships can be changed through collective human action. Marx's ultimate vision wasn't just to critique commodity fetishism, but to imagine how society could organize production and distribution in ways that make social relationships visible and democratic, rather than hidden and authoritarian. This might involve worker cooperatives where the people who make products also control how they're made and distributed. It might involve community ownership of enterprises that serve local needs rather than distant shareholders. It might involve participatory planning processes where communities collectively decide what to produce and how to distribute it. In such arrangements, the social relationships behind products wouldn't be mystified because they would be transparent and democratic. You would know who made your shirt because you might participate in decisions about working conditions and wages. You would understand pricing because you might be involved in discussions about how to balance different social priorities and constraints. Marx understood that this kind of transparency requires more than just better information or corporate social responsibility reporting. It requires changing the fundamental social relationships of production. Who owns what? Who controls what? Who decides what gets made? And how? This doesn't necessarily mean state ownership or central planning. It means economic democracy, extending democratic principles into the sphere of production and distribution that currently operates through authoritarian relationships hidden behind market mystification. The goal isn't to eliminate all social mediation through objects, but to make that mediation transparent and democratic rather than hidden and authoritarian. People will always use tools and trade products. The question is whether those activities serve human development and social cooperation, or whether they serve the accumulation of private wealth at the expense of human welfare. Marx believed that once people could see clearly how their daily economic activities